Promote your brand here at Viral Hip Hop News. Hit me, Sam Ant, at dlsmediainc1@gmail.com, dlsmediainc1@gmail.com. Let's go.
Welcome to another episode of the Hip Hop Uncensored Podcast. I'm your brother, Oga, from Hip Hop News Uncensored, and sitting across from me is my co-host.
What's going on, y'all? It's your man, Sam Ant, from Viral Hip Hop News. You're in the building for a very special edition of the Hip Hop Uncensored Podcast. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Christain Gregory. I know it slipped my mind because I'm honored to have him on. It's crazy. Dr. Christain Gregory on the Hip Hop Uncensored Podcast. How you doing this afternoon, sir?
Pleasure to meet you both. And it slipped your mind because it wants you to call me just Christian. This is a family gathering here. So, as Sam and Oh God, pleasure to meet both of you good brothers.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all ours, and we're very honored to have you on. Big fans of Dr. Christain Gregory and big fans of your late father, the great legend, Dick Gregory. The recent documentary that was out on him, the one and only Dick Gregory, out on Showtime now. If you haven't watched it, I strongly suggest you do. I had the pleasure of seeing it twice, and it was a very great documentary, and it gave us a lot of answers and to questions or things that we didn't even know about. I know personally I didn't know about as a young child growing up, and now as a 37-year-old man. So it was great to watch. So just kind of take us back, if you don't mind, Dr. Gregory, if you can, to just your humble beginnings and growing up with such a legendary father, and how your household was with such a strong mother and father and upbringing that you had.
Yes, absolutely. So it's going to sound odd, and I don't want to sound braggadocious, but for the 10 Gregory children, our beginning was anything but humble. I mean, it was silver spoons all around us. My pops and mom, they kept it real. I mean, we were definitively activists, but we were comfortable. I mean, we lived in a 3,000-acre farm in Plymouth, Massachusetts. My parents would pack us up like ducklings, take us down to the front line in the civil rights movement. Since the age of I'm one of the babies in the family. So since the age of 8, I can recall being arrested on a regular basis, just in the summer when we went down south as part of the movement. That was the tail end of the movement. A lot of the early 60s activity activism had really started to change things, but it allowed me at a young age to see the duality of the world, that America was definitively a place. You show me the man, I'll show you the law. Show me the woman, I'll show you the law. We went from slavery to Jim Crow, just to flat out white supremacy and racism. And I'm not someone, because I was born in a different generation, that I can only see life through that prism, because sometimes when you do that, it can be suffocating. So, many folks see the Matrix and they say, red or blue pill. They see the glass. It says the glass half full, glass half empty. What the glass is refillable. Pick up the pitcher and refill the glass. And that was how my pops always raised us, to understand that there's opportunities all around us. We have to be aware of the isms, but definitely we have to persevere. In 2021, America is just a land of abundance. I mean, I can remember as a kid, probably 20% of the cars on the road were hoopties. They barely ran, they backfired. Now you go out and about, you don't see that anymore. And so there was a day you could tell which children had wealth, which didn't. Now everyone's got a smart device. We're all connected to this aspect of the internet, and that's a blessing. There's still definitely double standards that need to be addressed, but with that abundance, it allows us to sit, as I'm looking at you brothers right now, 3 laptops, professional mics, professional headphones. That's really all it takes to be an activist these days. I mean, you have your own platform that literally goes out to the world. 100 years from now, we'll all be gone, and someone may stumble upon one of these digital recordings that y'all made, and it really changes the world. I always say you never know how far-reaching something you do or say today will be tomorrow. I'm certain some of what my dad thought was insignificant went on to still, in this day and age, some 60 years later after he wrote some of his books, still reverberate all around the world. And so it's important to understand digital content. It's like our DNA. It's here to stay. And it's important that every time, and that's part of the reason I do so many podcasts and reach out. As a Gregory, we always had, at least our ear to the street, no matter where we were, to be aware of what was going on with our people, not just in Africans in America, but across the diaspora. So it's heartwarming to see young brothers like yourself doing the good work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now you said you grew up, where you grew up at. At what point as a child did you realize that your father was a great man, obviously, an activist? At what point you say, you know what, my dad, was somebody special?
At a pretty young age, and it wasn't from him telling us. Here we were probably one of the only Black families in Plymouth, Massachusetts. We moved there. The town had a parade to welcome us. You didn't have a lot of Black cats showing up to a town to integrate it and have a parade out of excitement to welcome you. So from a pretty young age, and it was a who's who of folks that were hanging out with my dad, from just Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Jackson 5, you name Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you name the athlete or superstar, they had a relationship with my dad. And not just a relationship like friends, they really revered and looked up to him. So when I'm saying the folks I look up to, when I see them really look, I always respected my dad, but when I saw the reverence that folks who I held on at a high level, hold him at a significantly higher level. I've watched the Bill Cosbys, the Richard Pryors of the world, Eddie Murphy get down and kiss my dad's hand when he would walk into a room out of respect. And so I knew pretty early on that, something was different, and I knew we'd received a ton. So I knew that a lot was, we were required to give a significant amount back. And all 10 of us Gregory children, we're really out there on the front line. I'm a chiropractor by trade. When my dad passed, I transitioned into film and television production. It was something I always did with my dad anyway. And so I realized one of the best ways for us to give back is to leave this intellectual property, this storytelling, which is very African on its own, because actually we're a verbal people, we're storytellers. And my dad was a master storyteller. So I'm just doing my part to keep the legacy alive, and not just tell Dick Gregory stories, which are amazing to tell, but to really tell, stories that uplift our people, because we've been suppressed for so long. My dad would always say, and I'll be colorful as he would always say it, first thing a nigga needs to do when he gets some money, some real money, is spend about $3 million on treats just to get his mind right. And so that was, and that's how we used to consult folks. Some of the cats who, hey, I don't use the N-word. Dick Gregory was always super real. My dad's first book in 1963, well, it came out in 1964, he named it nigger because he wanted to force, he said, look, white folks, you put this word on us. Now that it makes you uncomfortable because you're embarrassed by it, you don't want us to use it. So I'm going to name it the title of my book. And here in 2021, we just released nigger in Japanese. And this is the Japanese version of nigger. And a friend of mine, white cat, explained to me that the little symbol there means knee, and that means gar, knee gar. And I said, hold up, cat, you said that a little too quick. You knew you were a little too clear on how to say nigger in Japanese. So no, it's just the beat goes on, man. The beat goes on, and laughter is good medicine. So definitively, us Gregorys laugh a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely appreciate that. We, as young adults, as men now, we grew up watching Dick Gregory, and we seen the intellectual old man giving knowledge, the crazy old man giving conspiracy theories. But enjoying the documentary, I got to see different layers of Mr. Dick Gregory. And one of those layers was how much of an executionist he was on stage as a comic, how he was one of the first Black comics to walk in an all-white crowd and just wow them and make them laugh with his intellect. And then it was really intriguing how he had the cigarette. He would drop the punchline and pause, and his timing, it reminds me of what I saw in Chappelle now. And it just made me go, okay, this is where Chappelle got it from. Like, he's paying homage to Mr. Dick Gregory in doing this. So can you just talk about the brilliance and his dynamic on stage as a comic when he was first introduced to the world?
Absolutely. Great question. So it's not a coincidence that Dave's delivery is that way. Dave Chappelle and Dick Gregory were great friends. My dad knew Dave since he was probably about 15 or 16, and they had a close relationship then because Dave's parents were close with my dad. So Dave always had a great affinity. He always had a ton of respect for Dick Gregory. So for me, it does my heart warm to see Dave delivering like early Dick Gregory delivered. I mean, Dick Gregory was, I want to say in '68 or so, GQ magazine did a list of the coolest Americans, and Dick Gregory was on that list. I mean, the brother was cool.
Yeah.
Folks see, what it really tells us about the aging process and the life cycle. If you only know someone in one aspect of their life, not everyone's going to get a 2-hour film that does as deep of a dive that we did about my dad, but that's everyone's story. Sometimes you hear your grandma or grandparent talking about, and you just kind of dismiss it. Then you see the pictures from back then, and you're like, oh, wow. It's like, okay, now I see. We always think we get our fly on our own, and then we look back and say, okay, now I see, before the hips were replaced, before the hair went gray, there was a different person there. And definitively, my dad was always a soldier, and not all soldiers are about violence. You can be a soldier for justice, soldier for love, soldier for peace. My dad was always a soldier, meaning that he was willing to die for the things he believed in. And in the 60s, having that position, you got hurt a lot. I mean, my dad was physically beat on multiple occasions. My dad had false teeth for his whole life because when he was 14, he was a shoe shine boy, and he was shining a white woman's shoe and touched her shoe to keep it from sliding. And the white cat next to him kicked his teeth out. So he had the pain, things that we can't, sure, there's still definitively racism now. I mean, there's no question about it. It's omnipresent, but the level of, in 1932, when Dick Gregory was born in St. Louis, if a black cat was walking down the street and a white person approached him, you had to step to the side and look down. And now you could say, oh, hell no, that wouldn't. Those were the cats who were hanging from trees. I mean, it was a very different day. And it's important that we pay homage to those folks and acknowledge the rights that we now have, not just to be comfortable with it, but to dig and do more for those who come after us, because we definitely still have a lot of work to do. I mean, we're far from there, but you don't have to be all work, no play. It's important that yin and yang, you got to balance it out. My pops and I would be on the front lines. We'd be out there yelling and marching and screaming, and then go to the Four Seasons and get a massage. I mean, you had to balance it out, and there's no selling out in that. It's like you got to feed the mind, you got to feed the brain. And so, but at the same time, we wouldn't go to those places and allow them to treat us any different than their other paying customers. So it's been just an incredible ride to watch the movie, because a good portion of what you see in the movie, I wasn't born. I was born in 1970. My dad, the entertainer, the megastar, in 1961, Dick Gregory was the largest entertainer in America, not black, period, black or white. The highest earning entertainer in America. That's like Kevin Hart level now, and having that level of success and saying, I'm going to say goodbye to it because y'all aren't treating my people right down south and up north too, and to turn your back on it. And that's really the only reason we're telling the story. There's been other wealthy black men, successful black men and women. We're telling this story because here was someone who was willing to sacrifice and give it all, not risk it, give it, because it wasn't like, oh, this is risky. He knew he was giving it all away to go back and help his fellow brothers and sisters. And we could all learn from that and do more and be inspired by that.
Absolutely.
Well, now your father's, his political career, went all the way, to the White House. He tried as a write-in candidate. In your opinion, why do you think that he didn't continue further on his career to try to run for presidency, since he had so much, was loved and revered by so many people?
My dad had zero, let me be very clear, zero desire to be president. He said that himself. He said, had he won, he would have demanded a recount. And so if you look today, most people running for president, they're not running to win. It's an industry now. They want to get radio shows, TV shows, write books. Half the people up there, they'd be shocked if they won. They're running to increase their amplification, their pedigree. And so my dad running as a black man was really just so, black people could see this person he already was a household name. And that's always important when you're running, because most people don't, they don't have their finger on the pulse of politics. You go and vote, a couple names on there, and some of them you're just guessing. You don't know because the roster's so long that the ballot's so long that you're picking from. So he knew that he didn't have a chance, but he knew that he did have a chance to change minds and to change hearts. And so he really ran for president in 1968 as a statement, not just a political statement, but a statement about intelligent Black people, and showing the world an intelligent Black man engaging on the issues of the day and being able to debate with white, Asian, Latinos, anyone who was there to show that Black folks are equal of mind. For so long, Hollywood showed images of Black folks that were really beneath our intelligence. And so he was for his lifetime, he was trying to offset that and really show that you can be intelligent and you can still give back to your people. As he would always say, George Washington wasn't fighting for education, he was fighting for liberation. We have too many Black folks who get educated and then just stop. No, you get educated to go on and liberate your people, because we're still not fully liberated.
Appreciate that. Now, one of the very interesting parts of the movie or documentary to me was his relationship with Medgar Evers as well, and just how deep that ran. And then Medgar Evers being murdered and coming to find out your father was supposed to be with him, but wasn't because of the death of your 3-month-old, I believe it was a brother, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, correct.
And just hearing that and knowing how deep that went. And then like we talk about COINTELPRO and then the FBI and the CIA now, but it almost seems as though it's an urban legend, so to speak. Like people hear it, but it doesn't really register the way how real and how in depth it really was. To see the documentary, it almost brought it back. CIA following your dad, FBI, and all the other alphabet agencies out here looking at your dad, what he's doing. Talk about that time, if you may, what he was going through during the time, not only personally, but watching his friend get murdered, knowing he was supposed to be there, just the whole thing that surrounded that.
Another great question. If you look at Dick Gregory just as one man, and you look at his immediate orbit around him, so many of his friends got gunned down. I mean, Medgar Evers, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, these are just the names we know, but he knew many more names. There were many more people close to him that were, assassinated by the movement, by white supremacy. And my dad was great friends with John Lennon. John Lennon was killed by gun violence, and my dad firmly believed that there was a government aspect or angle to that. And my dad was really close friends with Larry Flint from Hustler magazine. They, oddly enough, Dick Gregory, here you have Hugh Hefner, who gave my dad his first opportunity, who's a pornographer. Then you have Larry Flint, who's a pornographer. Dick Gregory was the polar opposite of that, but he linked up with those cats on First Amendment issues. And so my dad was flying all over the world fighting with Larry Flint on First Amendment issues. My dad missed his flight down to Atlanta when the attempted assassination on Larry Flint, when Larry Flint was shot. Dick Gregory was supposed to be with him. And so some people hear that and they say, well, damn, Brother Dick might have been an agent. He's around all these people getting gunned down and he didn't get gunned down. And when you're on the front, it's not like this is just random cats hanging out at a cookout. These soldiers on the front line. And if we're, SEAL Team 6 on the front line together, a lot of us aren't coming home. And so what Dick Gregory would always point out is that, fear and God don't occupy the same space. He definitively never feared the system. He respected that it could be deadly. So he was fearless, not reckless. And there's a fine line between being reckless and fearless. And I truly believe, back to your original point, Sam, when Medgar Evers got assassinated, that really just, to my dad's core, rocked him. Because he firmly believed, had Richard Jr. not passed away, he would have been with Medgar for his entire lifetime. He said he would always repeat, it would have been an honor to have died with Medgar. That was the degree of closeness the two of them had. And as Myrlie Evers very eloquently, Dr. Evers lays out in the film, they were like brothers, closer, a bond closer than blood brothers. And a lot of brothers and sisters in the military that have seen action, they understand that bond. It's a very unique thing that many times is deeper than a blood brother, deeper than genetics. You've seen things that you wouldn't wish on other people. And that was really their connection. And I think a lot of the fearlessness Dick Gregory went on to have later in life was some of it was rooted in a sense of survivor's remorse. He almost felt like, I'm on borrowed time. I'm almost certain I shouldn't be here. So I'm going to my last breath, when the film talked about him cussing Kevin Hart out, and he was doing that with love. And Kevin understood. I was there that day, and it was powerful, but it was definitely rooted in love. And Kevin picked up on that immediately. And really the way he reacted was the exact way he retold the story in the documentary. Was like, I'm not pushing back. Dick, I'm feeling this. You're coming at me fast. Give me a minute to recalibrate. And part of it was, if for your lifetime you've seen your people turn right when they're supposed to turn left, and now you're older, you don't know how much longer you're going to be here, you get a little desperate, and your delivery reflects that degree of urgency. You've been telling everyone in the building there's a fire and no one's listening. Well, as that fire starts closing in, your tone starts to change. And as he knew he was ending approaching the end of his life cycle, because he had quite a few health problems he was dealing with that were related to, again, being a soldier, starving himself for the civil rights movement, not fasting for medicinal reasons, but starving himself as a form of activism. And my dad got down to 78 pounds. Here's a man who was once 288 pounds, 78 pounds from starving himself in opposition to the Vietnam War. He was about love. He was about peace. He was about humanity, equality, and just justice.
Right. Now, another, close ally of your father was Martin Luther King. First, can you talk about what you know about their relationship? And two, is it true that he, actually tried to be an intermediary between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X when they were going through their little, feud?
And so, yes. So here's I'm going to answer that in two parts.
Okay.
My very pregnant mother, who was currently pregnant with my brother Richard Jr., who passed away, I believe she was about 8 months pregnant at the time, were invited to the White House by President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. While they're at the White House, so it's Dick Gregory, my mom Lillian Gregory, very pregnant Lillian Gregory. President Kennedy introduced Dick Gregory to Dr. Martin Luther King. They hadn't known each other. They knew of each other naturally, but they had never met personally. So fast forward a few years later, later that year, both JFK was assassinated, Richard Jr. was dead. In short order after that, Dr. King was dead. And just to think of, here's this one man, Dick Gregory, and my mom too, that are there, that so many people in their orbit are suddenly, killed violently. Naturally, my brother died of natural causes of crib death, but still the hurt of just all of that death weighing on you. And knowing that the people you would have picked up the phone to call to help you were the folks who were doing it. A lot of times young folks will hear Dick Gregory say the strongest two powers in the history of the world is the black woman and the black church. And now we've kind of moved away from the church in that traditional sense. So we say, no, not the church. The church back then wasn't just a place to go and pray and tithe. That was if you got sick, there was no hospital to go to. You called the church. If the police were coming, if there was an emergency, you didn't call the police. The police were the one doing it. You called the church. If your home was on fire, you called the church. If someone in your family died, you called the church. So that's what Dick Gregory was talking about. He was never speaking about isms and osms. The relationship, my dad was, he respected everyone that was respectable. He would say that, honor thy father. He'd say, bullshit. Honor thy father if thy father is honorable. So you just don't get a blanket pass. And so he had a great relationship with Malcolm X. I mean, he had an incredible relationship with Malcolm X. A lot of people hear when Malcolm was on the record and saying Dick Gregory and these other entertainers need to stop meddling and being clowns as we're sitting here trying to do this real work. That was before Malcolm met Dick Gregory. When they met for the first time, Malcolm had called my dad, Dick Gregory, brother Malcolm, and my dad naturally immediately recognized his voice. And he said, they talked and they chopped it up. And Malcolm said, I'd like for you to come down and visit me at the mosque. That was kind of a test to see if you were really for your people. Would an entertainer risk being seen going into the mosque and then potentially having the full force of the FBI on their back. And, my dad said, of course, I'll come down there tomorrow. And they hung up. Then he said 5 minutes later, Malcolm called back, said, Dick, stop playing. You can't. A celebrity your size, your stature, there's no way you can come down to this mosque. And my dad said, not only will I come down to the mosque, but the only way I'm coming down, if we stand on the steps and hold up the newest copy of Muhammad Speaks on the front step and call for a press conference. And there's a famous photo of my dad. Malcolm's not in the photo because that was the time there was some tension within the Nation of Islam, and that's its own story. And I'm not an expert on that. I just know that there's another brother in the Fruit of Islam that day standing with my dad, and they're both, those brothers, many times they're not smiling, but they're smiling as they're holding up because they're saying, wow, this cat, he walks it like he talks it. And ever from that day on, Dick Gregory and Malcolm X were just incredibly close friends. The Gregory family and Malcolm's family is still very close. Sister Betty Shabazz was like a mother to me. All of these folks, Coretta Scott King, Dr. Dorothy Height, Sister Betty Shabazz, Rosa Parks, all of them were patients of mine back when I practiced as a chiropractor. So I didn't just hear these stories from my dad. I heard all these stories from the folks who were in Cicely Tyson, all these folks who were in the movement. They come to my practice, lay on the table, and it was like, going to see a shrink. All the stories would just come out. And I just have all that in here. And it really continues to be a North Star for me to let me know just how blessed and fortunate and how much work is still left to do. But Martin Luther King, soldiers have different strategies. All the great generals didn't always agree on what's the best strategy. Same objective, but different strategy. And so one was by any means necessary, and the other was like, we shall overcome and, nonviolence. And when you look at them from 30,000 feet up, from a strategy and just almost a system of warfare, because that's what it was, history kind of shows which, you can't match violence with violence. When I see these white militias out here and they got their guns and they're calling on the government, and I say, they're not going to come with guns. A drone's going to drop a droplet of whatever in your water supply. None of these cats wake up in the morning. It's like delusional to think that there's some type of traditional warfare here. All they got to do is hit the switch and no one's phones work and communication shut down. The playing field is far from level. So we need to, teach our young Black children how to code, how to understand. I mean, now with 5G, it's just so important to understand technology. We got folks in our community that are talking about NFTs and they don't even know, it's just a word. It's just 3 letters to them. We have to take the time to understand, because the blockchain is definitively the future. If someone had approached us talking about the World Wide Web prior to the web, we'd say, what are you talking about? Some of these things are so big, we can't wrap our brain around the concept, but the blockchain is here to stay. And I'm not talking about cryptocurrencies, and I don't knock that. They ultimately will have a huge presence in all of our world globally, but crypto collectibles and using the blockchain to, almost like you buy a house, you get a deed for it. Now you'll be able to deed your intellectual property. So if you write a song in your laptop right now and it goes out, anyone can take it. We have certain copyright protection and other things, but once you can attach it to a non-fungible token, then it is yours in perpetuity. And then whoever you leave your will to, that concept is profoundly important for, young Black folks, period. But, I'm an advocate for Black folks, for young Black folks to really understand how important it is to understand that and to make sure our children understand that. Because it's really not the future, because it's the present, but it's definitively going to carry on and increase in the future.
Absolutely. I want to ask you this, because you were speaking on a lot of our leaders, and it just kind of made me reflect on the leadership that we had 40, 50 years ago. We weren't around to see it, but our parents were. Talking about Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Eldridge Cleaver, the list goes on and on, Fred Hampton, the list goes on and on. All of them no longer being here. Your father, unfortunately enough, passing away a little more different, completing a little more of a life cycle. But you fast forward to today, And we don't deal with the issues that we dealt with 40, 50 years ago, but we still deal with our share of real serious issues.
Definitely.
And where's our leadership now? Where are these people that were there? Is it more of a systematic thing from behind the government, like just going in within and tearing it down and us not being able to kind of regather it from that? Or what in your opinion, is it that has the lack of leadership in our community verbally like we had 40, 50 years ago? And where do you see us as a change from 40, 50 years ago to now?
Another great question. So back in the 60s, we needed leaders because there was an information void. You weren't getting information in the newspaper, there was no such thing as Google and smart devices. So we needed leaders to explain to us what's going on all around the world. We needed green books that were physical books to tell us where it was safe to go, where it was safe to drive. In 2021, the need for that, and this is something that's kind of uniquely with the Black community, that we need leaders. We need leaders. We're all leaders now. We all have the same access. You don't have to be a doctor or a lawyer. You can Google the most complicated legal concept and have a working understanding of it just from the device in your pocket. So, we are all the leaders now. And the problem is when we put leaders up on a pedestal or in a position, then all of the resources go after. So let's say the three of us right now start, whatever. Black Lives Matter 10. This is us now. And we start doing good. Money's coming in from our people, not people trying to infiltrate us, but our people. We go and get an office. We get company cars. We hire staff. Then our people's money dries up. Now we got a taste of being business folks. And so now we got to go out and find funding. And the moment that happens, that's when you compromise yourself. So anytime folks have to have a building, a staff, automobiles, paying for flights for them to get around the world, that's when you run the risk. That's when it makes it easy. As you saw, my dad always gave everything away. And since he wasn't attached to anything, that's part of the reason he lived his whole life, lived a full life cycle. And Dick Gregory living to be 84, chronologically, biologically, he was like a good 110. He had a lot of miles on that body. And that's a success story. As Black folks, we need to pat ourselves on the back. Here's one of our heroes that, lived a full life cycle. My father's father died when he was 65 and his mother died when he was 40. Dick Gregory far outlived his DNA. So we look at it by today's standards where, folks are living to 90 and 100. Quality of life is profoundly important, more so than quantity. So a lot of these folks, they're alive, but they're not living, but they're there. And Dick Gregory lived very much so up into his last week. He had 10 shows scheduled on the week that he passed. And I think it's important that as a community, we celebrate the victories of someone who always had our back, was always in our corner. Many times he had the opportunity to really cash in, and he chose not to because he knew it would make him vulnerable. So I'm not anti any of these organizations because, quite honestly, I'm so busy, I'm not studying them. That's not my job because I know I don't use that. But you can look at even a lot of the animal rights organizations, the environmental organizations. Many of them are no longer on task. So they get their money from the folks they're at, and they tell them, you can fight this, this, and this, but don't come over here. Leave this cash cow alone for us. So we are all activists. And one of the things I feel, we are all leaders. One of the things I feel like the film really shows is that we all can do more. Wanda Sykes in the film says, what Dick Gregory taught me, if you're going to throw something, aim higher. We should all aim higher. And collectively, the only reason police, law enforcement works is because we all respect it. The numbers don't work. If all of us suddenly said, we're done with it, we're going to turn, they don't have a chance. So if all of us become activists and all of us become leaders, we start to change the fabric of the system. And as my dad would always say, he always studied things looking to find the cracks in the fiber. That would be the cracks in the matrix to see what's really going on. And most of us, and I say this frequently, we're out yelling about this or that, and that's fine. But then we come home to a house full of refined white sugar, high fructose corn syrup, white flour. This is the stuff that's, I'm a scientist. I look at statistics, the things that are statistically killing Black people, not have all the glamour and ugliness and horrification of, police murdering Black folks, and white supremacy. But the real white supremacy is white flour and white sugar. If you go back over, just the slave diet, soul food, all these things. And I think 100 years, 200 years from now, Dick Gregory's largest contribution to humanity and society is going to be the work he did to wake folks up about their diet. So I'm not looking for any leaders. Like, any leader out there now, and there's plenty of people who I find motivation from, but no, even my own dad, I never, we didn't argue about things because I respected the fact that 90% of what he saw, I couldn't even understand. But we didn't agree on everything. You're not supposed to. And so I look at me and all 9 of my brothers and sisters. We're all very different people. We're rooted in the same concepts, the same spirit of love. All of us advocate for fairness and equality. All of us advocate for Black folks. And we don't just stop at Black folks, but, that's the real focus for us because we saw that firsthand and most of us experienced it. But none of us really belong to any big organization. There was a time that was needed, and and God bless folks that's still the way that they go about doing things. But really, we can all, as individuals, do so much more now. I was talking to Nick Cannon, who was a great friend of my dad's, and he had put, I think it was around the time of Kaepernick, and he put like a 5-minute, well-produced video up, and it may have been like I Can't Breathe or whatever it was, but it was well produced. And I remember looking at it and mentioning to Nick, I said, that one video that cost you next to nothing because your own team did it is the equivalent of 500 buses of civil rights marchers showing up. Like, for folks who want to march and want to hold signs, it's very therapeutic to do that. So I say get out there and do it. But the real way you change things is financially, voting with your dollar. You're out there protesting against the system, drinking the Pepsi-Cola and the Coca-Cola. Some of the folks, and I'm not just calling them out, but many of these study the corporations that you do business with. And by saying doing business, I mean spending your money with, and vote with your dollar. And you want to see folks change. I remember growing up, Timberland, which is damn near a Black brand now, was not all that way. Timberland was like, it was the construction, it was the worker brand. And when Black folks in urban America first started rocking Timbs, Timberland put a statement out, an aggressive statement. We do not make our products for urban communities, which is Black. We reject the notion. And brothers stood up and started boycotting. And now you can get Tim's in every flavor and every Black and mild flavor. They got a Tim out now for, and it just shows the power of our dollar. Yeah. And if we could unite and do that, but cocaine, sugar was the original cocaine. It's the cocaine of the food industry. Most of these people are so hopped up on sugar and high fructose corn syrup. It's like trying to get someone off of heroin to get them away from those products that they're addicted to.
Yeah, man, that was definitely powerful. Talk about Barack Obama, if you may, and your father's relationship with Barack Obama.
So Dick Gregory, being a social critic, if I became president, he would have his foot in my ass. That's his job. Like, it wasn't about, do I like you? Do I respect you? My job is to hold, people in power accountable. And there's no one who held folks more accountable than Dick Gregory. And so you named the president. I was there. I was there, when Cosby went in on Kevin Hart. I was there when he went in on Bill Clinton. I was there when he went in on Obama. Like, he didn't hold back for anyone. And so he loved what not just Barack Obama, but the Obama family meant as an optic, as an image to the world. The whole world seeing this dignified and graceful and beautiful Black family with so much power and so much dignity and so much grace. All the incoming and little racial barbs, they never stooped to it. They always kept their chin up. And if you were, a young person of color in Bangladesh, you don't speak a word of English, you can look at that image on a TV set or a photograph and be inspired by that. So, So the Obamas, as far as inspiring, just amazing. And my pops had a ton of love for that aspect. He also had enough respect for the Obamas, for President Obama. At least 15 times he was invited to the White House, and he never went until the very last invite at the end of the presidency. And the reason was, he said, I don't want the shit I'm out here talking to get on him, and now he's got to deal with, well, why is Dick Gregory up in the White House? He said, I'd like to operate in my own space, and I don't want to bring another brother down. But we also understood that, Democrat or Republican is Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. The system's designed so no real changes happen. I remember my dad and I meeting with Nelson Mandela in Pretoria, South Africa, not long after Mandela had become president, and just seeing the entire white infrastructure around him and saying, most, struggling Black South Africans think money's going to start falling from the sky. And, and they'd be right to think that, hey, it's over. We got one of our brothers is in. But if your brother is in that same system, and that system, the systemic racism of that system, these things have to turn slowly. So the presidency is like a cruise ship with 50 different people driving it. One person we hold accountable for it. So we knew no immediate and meaningful long-term change. And like we found out with the last president, with Trump, you can change whatever you want by executive order. It's just going to get changed right back the moment you're out. You need the people to change with you. And I think the Obama legacy will really show that it's done a lot of good for the people to start to change. What Barack Obama showed us is something that most, of us can't relate to. What a post-racism, post-racial, brother looks like. Because of the way Barack was raised, I would say this to my dad all the time. If I go into Neiman Marcus and I'm wearing a beautiful tie and the white cat working security looks at me twice, he might be admiring my tie. But just the baggage I have as a Black man, I'm like, oh, damn, this cat's judging me. He's watching me already. And really, he's like peeping my swag like, oh, you're put together. And so that baggage that I definitively have as a Black man, because I've been exposed to it. And it's like, if every time you see your pet, you hit them or kick them, that's what they're conditioned for. So Barack Obama, because of, being raised by the white side of his family, the time he spent in, I believe, Indonesia being raised, he really had the opportunity to kind of shake some of the baggage. I wouldn't say at all he shaked his Blackness. As my dad would say, Barack Obama, he's out here being super Black. And super Black for Dick Gregory was not a complexion thing. It was how you live your life, how the love you have for your people is what he would refer to as super Black. I know for a fact, if I was the first Black president, I'm not inviting folks over for a fried chicken and peanut summit. I'm not moving every day. Like, it was great to see that, because I'm saying all the baggage, I would have tried to be all proper and, and feeling the weight of all these Black people are looking for me to fix these things, knowing that no one person can fix it. So my dad had a lot of, criticism, and he's probably on the record on Obama. But he had that too. I mean, my dad's gone hard on, Magic Johnson, Oprah Winfrey. Then he sees his folks and they give him the world's biggest hug because they know, Dick, this is your job. You're a social critic. You're supposed to have your foot in our ass, but we love you for it because we know what you're saying is rooted in love. Oprah Winfrey invited my dad to her home in California. She was giving away, it was her Legends Ball. And I won't use the colorful language he used, but he was basically saying, hell no, he's not going. All the beep, beep, beep. I talked about that beep, beep, beep. And so there's no way I'm going. So we convinced him, because all of his friends were going to, we're like, Pop, just go. It'll be special. So we said, all right, I'll go, but I'm not going to eat shit. I'm not going to drink shit. And so then I got the videos back of him there, and he was drinking his ass off, eating his ass off, dancing and having a good old time. So it's one thing to really, as an activist, to speak out on things, hold people accountable, but you got to have balance. You got to there's too many, most of the serious activists I know don't live long because, we're mammals, 605 muscles, 202 bones. If you're growling 24/7, your body's not responding, your physiology is not responding favorably to that. So you have to balance it out. Work, but get off the front line and relax so you can go back rested. As we hear everyone talking about, and I don't get caught up because this is white folk stuff. Oh, this person's woke, this person. That is really us. This is other people again. Like Black folks didn't decide we're going to start being African Americans. That was a handful of folks, mostly white folks, that said, okay, this is the new title. Okay, we're no longer going to use the quote unquote N-word. My dad and I were in Detroit when some pretty high ranking Black folks had a mock funeral for the word nigger. And they had a casket. I mean, it was kind of embarrassing, actually. They had a casket and they were, all right, we're going to put this word to rest. We're going to bury this word. And me and my dad were in Detroit on other business. We definitively were not there for that. But we connected with some of these cats later. You've never heard so many niggas in your life at the reception. The niggas who just came from burying nigger were saying nothing but niggas. So it's like, you got to take a step back and just don't get caught up in the brinksmanship, the semantics, just stay steady. Don't just do stuff for what you think other folks want to hear. Do real stuff that moves the needle. My dad would always say, I'm not talking to these young folks about pulling their pants up. We're dealing with, cops killing us. The last thing I'm worried about is not that at some point, some of these things might need to be addressed, but that's luxury item. Too often we start thinking like white folks and thinking like, like the pro-life, pro-death movement. Black folks don't have the luxury to only think about 9-month-old fetuses. We're getting killed out here at 9, 90, and 19. We got to think about saving life across the spectrum. So it's important not to get roped into that. When you hear people, cancel culture, cancel. You can't cancel nobody more than you did with slavery. You can't cancel nobody more than you did with lynching folks. That was cancel culture. Now you got some white grandma that gets caught using the N-word while driving her school bus, and now I'm supposed to feel bad because she lost her job. Teenagers got lynched for less. So at least you breathe and live and go get another job. So I'm not, again, a lot of times that's white folks and their systems trying to change the narrative. Just like I was in Atlanta, the first time, someone violently was taking people. It was during the crack cocaine epidemic, which again, that was a horrible thing. Now heroin is a sickness and a disease. So like how they change things when it's their community as opposed to our community. But it was during the crack cocaine epidemic, and folks were snatching people out of their vehicle. It didn't have a name back then. Then some savvy news producer called it carjacking. And then carjacking became the shit. It was like, okay, this is what we're doing now. We're carjacking. We see it now with the attacks on Asians. Oh, this is, if someone's mentally not adjusted well, all right, this is what Brothers is doing now. We're attacking Asians. And some of this is programming. So we need to unplug and just use our common sense to say that media, and we all now are media. My dad always wanted us to have Black-owned media companies. And so what you brothers are doing is media, but we don't control the platforms. We don't, You may get 1 million likes, but you only get credit for 200,000 likes. We wouldn't know. We don't control these platforms. We don't control these algorithms. A different version of that was when Spike Lee was putting out movies in the 80s. A lot of movie theaters were rigging the system so they would push a button for another movie, and then a Spike Lee ticket would come up, but you were crediting a white film. I mean, the games are, and if you don't understand the system for how they count, how they credit how many people are watching a particular show. That's why I keep telling folks, not only watch the one and only Dick Gregory, rewatch it, watch it again, tell others, because by eyeballs on screen, this is a business. If things do well, you get more of it. Otherwise, it's we tried to do Brother Dick's story. It wasn't viable. It didn't sell well. That's what Malcolm X, they did one story on Malcolm, and then it was done, one and done. I managed my dad's estate, and I made a decision early on. My dad has 16 books and 12 albums. No one person would own all of that. So we carved out certain aspects. So there'll probably be 20 Dick Gregory movies, 20 Dick Gregory stories, each that focus on different parts of his life. And if you don't understand intellectual property and the importance of protecting most of us die, we have a will, and our will covers, tangible, real things. It doesn't cover, theoretical things. And so most of our life, again, with 5G, virtual reality and reality sync up. Half the stuff we're out here building now does not exist in a tangible world, and it has real value to it. I mean, you've seen what some of these early NFTs have sold for. I mean, that's real money. That's not virtual money. That's real money. So it's important that we also, all of us in our phones probably, just in our text messages alone, probably have 10 movies worth of content. We have to protect our content. We have to make sure that there's websites and platforms out here that you can sign up with, that after they verify that you're dead, and it's by a loved one or whoever submitting your death certificate, they then release, okay, send my Dropbox account passcode to person B, send my, iCloud account, because otherwise that stuff's locked and you can, no one can ever get it. The folks who want it can get it, but none of us, none of your loved ones can get it. And it was a woman, her husband died, and he had hundreds of videos of their infant child and the husband and the wife playing with the infant child. And she sued Apple trying to get them to unlock his phone. And they never did. They said, look, rules are rules. We understand this situation, but once people out here understand we're unlocking codes, a lot of folks have things on their phone they'd rather not unlock, whether they're alive or dead. So we have to do things to protect our intellectual property, because a lot of us Black folks, we have more intellectual property than physical property.
Absolutely, definitely appreciate it. I want to get your thoughts on, and first off, did your father have a relationship with Dr. Bill Cosby? And if so, what was that? And what is your thoughts on the recent events of what we see with Dr. Bill Cosby's release from prison?
So yes, my father, Bill Cosby has acknowledged and credited that there would be no Bill Cosby without Dick Gregory. So Dick Gregory, so let's talk about Bill Cosby. So Bill Cosby, the entertainer, the young entertainer, the bigger than life comedian. Absolutely. They had a wonderful relationship, but it was a professional relationship. That didn't hang. You'll hear Dick Gregory a lot say, I don't hang out with entertainers. That didn't mean they weren't friends and respectful, but they didn't go to each other's houses. They didn't party together. My dad's been to the Playboy Mansion to pick up checks. He's never went there to party. And so he just wasn't part of that lifestyle. And so fast forward, when the charges against Bill Cosby were first made public, my dad released a very, honest statement. Said, I'm a father of seven daughters. It's profound. These charges are horrifying. It's profoundly important that we pray for the truth to come out. And that was really the only position that he really ever took on it on the record. Now, he later went on to have, my dad had theories on why a lot of these things, much more than just that, were happening in Bill Cosby's life. But that was really the only official statement he made. The reality is that, they tell us we're a land of law and order. Then when law and order doesn't work out, similar to kind of O.J. Simpson, they have another net of law and order that they throw. And so our position was always, let the system be fair. There were too many, and I don't see everything through racial lines, but this was seen that way. There were too many white folks who had done, and I don't want to compare. Oh, you raped 8, you raped 10. Like a violation is a violation, and there were too many folks that were not being treated with the same standard. And so that was the issue we had, was that, we respect this system. You tell us, hey, this is the American judicial system. And then and O.J. Simpson as a perfect example. I don't know if O.J. did it or not. I don't have a dog in that fight. What I do know is that the criminal justice system had one verdict. Folks didn't like it, so they went and creatively found another way to circumvent the system.
Right.
Very similar with Bill Cosby. There was a creative way to circumvent the system. So I don't know what happened. What I do know is that the criminal justice system in this country, when it wants to investigate something, it can investigate it. And so that should happen, and that should have happened. And and I'm going to stick with my dad's narrative and just pray for the truth to come out, because if they're victims, they need to be acknowledged. And if Bill Cosby's the victim, it needs to be acknowledged. But I don't know. None of us don't. But there's a lot of hurt there. Sometimes something can be said and it can go on long enough, and rape and domestic violence is real, and so this just opens up wounds for folks who were so. It saddens me on a multitude of levels, and I firmly, and when I say pray, for me, again, it's not isms and osms. I'm a meditator. I'm channeling good energy. I'm seeing that light. That's the meditation and prayer I'm saying for the truth to come out, whatever that is. And I don't, for one moment, make a statement like I know one way or the other, but it was the tragedy, and I've said this before, if we're together and you start choking on food, I do the Heimlich maneuver on you. And we use that maneuver to dislodge you and open up your airway. If we find out later in life that Dr. Heimlich was a horrible, horrible human being, well, we still keep doing the Heimlich maneuver. We may change the name. Bill Cosby's contribution to the culture is profound. And it would be nice to separate what's currently happening over here with all of this tremendous body of good, this Heimlich maneuver that's over here. And we're adults. We should be able to carve out the two, and addressing one aspect of it. That's why I was never silent R. Kelly, canceled it. Like, all right, if you as an individual want to stop buying this,
Right.
Good music doesn't stop being good music because someone goes to do something horrible. Well, I'm not going to buy your records anymore. Well, I'm not going to, but there shouldn't be these, because if that's the case, we got to go back to John Wayne Airport and tear the signs down. We got to go back to all of Elvis Presley's songs singing about 14-year-old girls. We got to go back and do a whole lot of recalibrating. So I am definitively pro human rights, pro women's rights, and folks should be held accountable when they cross those lines. There's no question about it. I don't think that it needs to be a huge X through your entire contribution for your life cycle. And that was one of the things I worried with my dad when he got older, because he insisted on driving. He was having little accidents regularly. And I was just thinking, wow, I don't want some horrible accident with a school bus to wipe out the legacy of all the good work. And so I frequently say no country for old legends. The aging process is real. A lot of what I did for my dad, I also did for Miss Cicely Tyson. And I saw on a very real level how hard it is to carry limelight as the aging process starts to weigh on you. And collectively as a people, we need to do a better job kind of propping up our elders.
Definitely. I want to, speaking of that, I want to talk about his latter years. Did you think that your father had a premonition that his end was coming near soon, in your opinion?
Absolutely. More than a premonition, he said it. And so when we were all in the hospital, I run my dad's social media, so I'm letting folks know, giving them regular updates, because we always knew our dad was a dad to the world. He was a Baba to the world. It was never, he never had a bodyguard. We never had his phone number was always published. His address was always published. And so he just really, he was a man of the people. So we really wanted to keep them informed real time. We weren't trying to hide behind a wall of what was happening. And my dad was in the hospital for a simple urinary tract infection. And at 84, any infection that we get elevated white blood cells. And when you have dementia and you're older, elevated white blood cells mean, well, for every additional white blood cell, there's one less red blood cell. That means less oxygen's getting to the brain. So they become disoriented. And so my dad was real, he wasn't drugged, but it was almost like he was drugged because he was very disoriented. And he was talking to his brother Presley, who had died 20 years ago. He was talking to his mom. He was having some real deep, and we were just sitting there taking it all in, because we're looking at what the medical charts are saying that keep saying we should be leaving in a day or two. And he kept pulling me in and saying, hey, Doc, it's not what they think. It's deeper than what they think. He was clear. Even when the infection went down and he became more clear-headed, he was very clear that there was something more going on. And he had really already, and he was tired. I mean, he was real tired. I mean, and Dick Gregory was a man that didn't know how to rest. He was never going to get a rocking chair and go and sit at a pond and stare out at it all day long. That wasn't happening. And so I'm certain there was a time as he was transiting that he stopped communicating verbally. And it was just a lot of, squeezes and facial expressions. And he was at peace. And part of the reason I share that story so frequently, because I know there's a lot of folks that love this man, in different generations of them. There's a lot of people that knew young Dick Gregory that knew nothing about the older Dick Gregory that so many, millennials and Gen Zs were introduced to. So it was necessary for me to make sure that the world knew that, we had a victory. We had, from womb to tomb, this man lived the life that he wanted to live. And I saw all the immediate conspiracy theories. And, the only reason I loved seeing all that initially, because I knew my dad would have been pissed if Black folks weren't saying there was a conspiracy when he died. He would have came back and straightened some folks out. So I wasn't bothered. I mean, when you know the truth, things like that don't bother you at all. And it was a little comforting because I said, Dick Gregory would have been the first person saying Dick Gregory's death was a conspiracy. So he trained us all well. So that, as odd as it may seem, it was heartwarming for me to see those posts and, kind of smile inside to say, Pop, I know you're smiling down on this and you would have it no other way.
You do an excellent job of representing them, man. This is a masterful. I just wanted to put that in there.
I appreciate that, brother. I truly do. It's a badge of honor for me. I'm not just my dad's son. We were business partners and we really were best friends. And so when you have that level, and that's what, our parents take care of us, then we get the same age and we become equals in a sense. And for my dad, when he lifted that dad veil and, some of the siblings saw the motherfucker this, the nigga that, it was a little much, because I had never heard my dad swear in my entire life. I was 19. I was so happy because I thought something was wrong with me. I was like, here, foul mouth running. And then I was like, damn, for the first time I felt part of the family when I heard Pops cut up. And it was like a glow. And we clicked from that point. There was conversations to this day. If there was a hot mic, you wouldn't be talking to me right now. So we would talk about some wild stuff. I mean, and so for me, it just is so important to protect his legacy and still share that side. I mean, Dick Gregory was, for most of his life, he was a vegetarian, then a vegan. Then as he got older, he started letting it all hang out. And, he would sometimes show up with some shit. I was shocked to see him eating. And we all earn that right when we get older. Right. And he was doing an interview once. We were on NPR and they said, well, Mr. Gregory, you still a vegan? He said, depends who's watching. And so he was always honest with it. So and that doesn't mean he didn't support, but it's just when you get older, you want to do, and he earned that. So I was never like, oh, Pop, don't drink that. What do you, it's like, one of my sisters, called him out one day when we were heading to 30,000 feet, heading to Harare, Zimbabwe for a summit there. And it was a who's who of folks on the plane. And she called my pops out. Let me just say it didn't go well. So, family or not, he could let us have it. And I'll just say it didn't go well, but it was always rooted in just comedy and more laughter than you can even fathom. Dick Gregory's funniest jokes were never on a stage. And he would always explain the difference between being a comedian and being a humorist. Dick Gregory was both. Comedian was the material he did on stage. But when a comedian's on stage and someone heckles them, the ability to turn and come out of their routine and respond, that's a humorist. And most of us sitting around, playing the dozens, talking shit, that you always do. Brother Kwame Brown is a great example of a humorist. Like whatever and that's what a lot of people can't figure out what they're witnessing. He's a funny ass cat, not a comedian. He's not reading mind. He's responding on your asses, and it's quick. And that's what's fucking people up, because they're like, whoa, this brother, and he's got nothing to lose because they dogged him out for so long. So his skin is so thick. And for me, it reminds me a bit of my pop. And I sit back, and because I'm guilty. I was in DC, when Kwame first came to DC, and I'm not a sports cat. So I just, if y'all telling me he's a bust, whatever. Like I never gave it any thought. And I was like, whatever it is, he deserves every penny he's got coming, because there's plenty of white folks out there that got plenty of money to do shit for it. So I was like, whatever it is, he deserves whatever he's got coming, and good for him. And so now to see this reinvention, this reincarnation Oh, it's beautiful, man. I mean, I'm always late to things because I'm not completely in step with what's happening out here. But my wife and I, we went back watching over the videos and we just howled with laughter. It's just good to see. I couldn't tell you nothing about mama's cooking or seasoning. All I know is it's hilarious. It's spontaneous. It's real. And he seems, and I don't agree with I didn't agree with everything Bob said, but I love the fact he believes what he's saying. He's not being controlled by anyone. And some of the folks in our community that we're not supposed to go after, he's calling bullshit on, and he's going at them full speed ahead. So I just like honesty. Whatever your truth is, kick your truth and be fearless. And so it's uplifting to see.
Indeed, we definitely appreciate your time, Dr. Christain Gregory, on the Hip Hop Uncensored podcast. I got one final question for you, sir, if you don't mind. And it was kind of piggybacking off my cousin's last statement on how you represent your father so well. Is it always an honor, or is it sometimes a burden having such a legendary parent and oftentimes having to express memories of them as opposed to sharing memories or lively experiences of your own during some of these interviews?
Great question. And for me, and I think for most of my siblings, it's one and the same. People say, oh, what's it like being Dick Gregory's son? It's the only Pop's ever had. It's not like I can compare it to being someone else's child. So this is our DNA. This is part of our story. And since I'm so proud of his achievements, I've never, now 25 years I practiced as a chiropractor, I was never Dick Gregory's son, the chiropractor. Like, I never went out and advertised, hey, I'm Dick Gregory's son. People would come in and sometimes see my dad damn near sleeping in my office. Like, damn, is that Dick Gregory? And, you know, my dad, when he was dressed casual, he would be real. I mean, he was mistaken for homeless multiple times because his casual swag was not swag at all. So so they would have to ask. And so for me, most of my patients didn't find out who my dad was until after he passed, and they saw me speaking so much publicly on his behalf. When I was all of us Gregorys were required to go to historically Black colleges and universities. When I was at Morgan State, no one knew who I was, and I preferred it that way until my dad came to speak and had me stand up, and then life changed on campus for me. So I do get, it's not like everywhere I go, folks only know. There is definitively Christain Gregory in his own space, but I really feel there's an obligation to telling this story and recalibrating it and calling people out for when they only know a snippet of it and they don't know the totality of it. And I don't know the story just because I'm his son. Mm-hmm. I know because I've researched all the new book projects, done the research for the movies, 1,500 hours of archival footage. I've done the deep dive and the commitment I made to the documentary team. I said, if you all find a dead body in my dad's orbit, I want to know about it. And that's the reason, you know, it wasn't just a vanity credit. I was there every day in the decision-making process. Lena Waithe, Kevin Hart, and Andre Gaines are also going to be doing the feature film, the biopic. I'm a producer on that, not because I'm trying to say, oh, don't put that in, but I'm trying to say it has to be the truth. Dick Gregory was a man of the people, a man of the truth. I don't want to water it down. I heard someone say the other day, this is the watered down version because it didn't mention Malcolm X. And the truth is, there's 5 movies we left on the floor. There was just too much that it couldn't be fit. We could do Dick Gregory and Malcolm X in its own movie. Trust me, there's no fear from the family of expressing the love that the two of them had for each other. And that will come. But absolutely, for me, I appreciate both you and your cousin's kind words. And I hear it a lot because this is my full-time focus now of really propping up my dad's legacy and making sure people, you know, get it straight and love him or hate him, at least know that the man was, you know, he was on the front line for justice and he definitively loved his people.
Definitely appreciate you, Dr. Christain Gregory. Man, it's been an honor this past hour, and I wish you nothing but success, you know, in your endeavors. Real quick, before you get out of here, drop your social media outlet and let people know about the project on Showtime.
Yes, absolutely. So the project is the one and only Dick Gregory, available. It's scheduled on Showtime. You can also stream it 24/7. The film is like my dad's life. Every time you watch it, you find something different. There's a new little nugget, and plenty of the folks you love and appreciate are in there, letting you know their feelings. On social media, it's all just Real Dick Gregory. I'm Dr. Christain Gregory on social media. and I'll connect with you all to put all that information out there in regards to all my dad's nutrition products are still available at wellnessinnature.com, wellnessinnature.com. You'll hear a lot of that discussed in the movie. All of my dad's books have been republished. Just mentioned we released Nigger in Japan. We're getting ready to release Nigger in Croatia. And just me saying that would have my dad howling with laughter about, where we're dropping niggas at. So, it's real. The beat goes on. I appreciate you brothers and the time you allowed me on your platform here tonight.
Likewise.
Yeah, the honor is all ours. You're more than welcome to come back anytime. We'd love to come back and discuss about the health and the wellness aspect of your father, too. There's so much to digest and to get through. But we definitely appreciate your time during this hour. Dr. Christain Gregory on the HHU Podcast. Appreciate you, sir. Salute.
Thank you.
Salute.
All right.